to do. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Surf and Sales Podcast. I'm Scott Leese here with my good friend Richard Harris, and we are joined today by Richard Smith, who is one of our new good friends from across the pond, and he's somewhere near Newcastle in the UK right now. How's it going, Richard Smith?
Not too bad. I feel privileged.
Good to have you here. So, Richard Smith, I'm just going to call you Smith, and I'm going to call Richard Harris Harris for the rest of this episode, just to try to simplify things. Give our audience a little background on what you're doing right now. Like, what's Refract? You're the co-founder and head of sales at Refract. So tell everybody what Refract is and what the sale is like who you're selling to, what the cycle is like, and things like that.
Yeah, so been doing this about 5 years now. Refract was really born from my own experiences in sales as a budding SDR way back in the day, and a subsequent account executive and subsequent manager of teams. A lot of the frustrations I felt kind of trying to learn the ropes in sales growing up, but then being able to coach and help other salespeople get better at what they do. So that was the reason that we built the product. The best way I can kind of describe it is so much of sales happens in conversations that we have. If you have good conversations, you have good outcomes. If you have bad conversations, you don't have a good outcomes. The problem is there's so many facets to a good conversation in sales. And it's very hard to teach and coach salespeople to have better conversations with prospects without the ability of recording what actually happens in the call.
Are you guys focused with your product on coaching the frontline sales reps and SDRs, or are you focused on coaching sales leaders and sales managers, or is it both?
It's the former, but I guess one of the things that we see is that a lot of companies that use Refract are starting to use it to understand how managers interpret conversations, how they actually coach and give feedback to their reps. Really trying to do what has long never happened, of actually teach your managers to be good coaches. And so that's a kind of a new benefit, a new use case that we're seeing, but in the main, it's about actually helping the individual contributor get better at what they do. I think the best way to describe it when I speak with managers and coaches is saying, let's take Liverpool. You've got the scarf in the background there, Scott. It's like, could Jurgen Klopp do a good job of actually helping his team get better if he doesn't watch us back the tape of the match on Saturday? And what Jurgen Klopp does with his team every Monday morning before they go on the training pitch is they sit in the cinema room and they watch the game from the weekend, and they break down, what went well, which is often they do most things well, Liverpool, but they look at what didn't work out, what areas do they need to improve on the training pitch. They look at the game tape of the opposition they've got coming up on the weekend and look at what they do well and try and strategize. And this is exactly what we're doing in sales.
Yeah.
And I just love how you say everything. I just like how you say everything with a European vernacular. So now I have to think harder about, wait a minute, on the pitch, in the film room, that's fantastic. So, in the cinema.
I'm just diversifying the podcast, really, making this more of a global show versus US.
That's right.
We appreciate that.
We need his help tremendously. So who are you selling to, and what is the cycle like? Are you selling? So, I've been a VP of sale a number of times, VP of sales. So are you like prospecting, your team prospecting out towards somebody like me? Am I the buyer? And how long is that process, typically take? And what's the outreach like for you guys right now?
Yeah, very much VPs of sales, CROs, really the person who's their job is essentially relies on how well their sales team execute. also they'll have a vested interest if they've got frontline sales managers, making sure they're doing what they should be doing, which is, working with the team and helping them get better every day. Sales cycles, our average sales cycle is 39 days, based on when I last checked. So it's not a long, complex sale. I actually think it's really easy to build the value of what we do and sell the value to a sales leader, because oftentimes I'm speaking with sales leaders and they're not really happy with the effectiveness of their team. And, my product is never one that's budgeted for. Nobody ever has a budget for my product. Nobody ever earmarks a budget, but oftentimes it's a compelling reason to buy as to why they'd want to buy it. So
talk about that for a second. Like, I love this, right? And I think that so much of the world there is no budget for, right? Like, because they don't even know that this stuff exists in some cases. So in your mind, how do you, whether it's this product or another one, how do you approach someone like Scott, who's like, hey man, Richard, this is really cool. We just don't have the budget for it. How do you then, I'm trying to give the listeners a position of like, oh, I think I'd love to learn how you do that.
Yeah, I actually wrote a post about this morning, actually, or similar to this. I think the budget objection, particularly now more than ever, a lot of sales reps are getting hit with this, with the, in some cases, tougher economy that they're selling in, or tougher market conditions, is they're probably hearing now more than ever, not that there's no budget, where we're cutting costs. And I think part of the mistake that a lot of salespeople fall down in is that they don't seek to properly understand what that truly means. And oftentimes the budget issue typically is just the easiest thing for a lot of people to say. Of course, they don't have spare cash just lying about that they're ready to spend on the latest tool that gets presented in front of them. But I think the key thing here is to truly understand the extent of what no budget is. Like, no budget right now, cutting costs could mean we're laying off literally half of our workforce right now. Okay, maybe this isn't the best time to be having a discussion with you right now about our product. No budget could be, we're cutting costs in these other tools that we don't get much use of right now because there's a bit of a spotlight on them right now. However, yours might actually be what we need in the current situation. So I think the best way to do that is to ask that question front onto the prospect. And I'll say something like, yeah, I'm hearing that a lot right now, no budget. In fact, most people I speak with right now are telling me they're cutting costs. It just takes away the kind of the pressure from the room and just lowers that resistance of, the prospect feeling like you're not just about to ignore what they've just said. And then I'll say, just so I understand, when you say no budget, is this like, are you slashing costs in the company? Are you facing layoffs right now? Or is it that you just are being a bit more careful and select about where you're spending your money? And you'll get an answer.
So yeah, no, I love this, because what I'm hearing is, which is what I love to do, is anytime I hear a buzzword, right, like budget, I want to drill down. And I always say, well, what do you mean when you say that? Because it could have about 100 different meanings, right, depending on who I talk to and the day of the week. And so you're just, from a sales process perspective, you're talking about keep asking more clarifying questions. Keep clarifying till you understand where they are in their own headspace, right? We've been talking a lot about, you got to meet your prospects or clients in their own head, in their own mind. And people buy and sell pictures. They don't buy and sell words. So they use a word, but behind that word budget is some picture. There's some picture of them in a meeting with their CEO who said cut. There's some meeting with the CFO. There's somebody saying, hey, go tell us which tools we are not using, right? So we're trying to get to that picture. So I love how you did it. And for those listening, it's just keep asking more clarifying questions around buzzwords. That's how I interpret what you said.
Right. And I think also an interesting comment that on my status, Richard, that someone said, is that the person who says no budget is usually the person who would never even hold a budget anyway. They just had that message funneled down to them from up top. Or they've just heard it kind of mentioned in a sales meeting somewhere, of like, oh, budgets are tight right now, and they feel like they're doing their job to kind of put that message out to the world. But I think for me, it's just, it's one of the easiest things to deal with. And I think people kind of stress about, oh, I'm getting hit with no budget right now. And what do I say? And what do I do? And it's so hard. And most of the time, they're not even taking the step of actually understanding what that really means. They're just hearing it and they're kind of thinking, what magical, mystical objection handling technique can I use to swerve around it? And it's just, that's not the way that you do it.
So I want to clarify even further, and I love what you just said, which is the person who says no budget usually doesn't have this, doesn't hold the purse strings to the budget. So let's say you say
they don't have the credit card, yeah.
Right. Let's say someone says, well, I don't have a budget. So now you trained yourself that, that means this person doesn't have the budget. How do you then navigate through that part of the conversation? Because clearly you have to go around them, but you don't want to offend somebody, right? You may already have good rapport. How do you then approach it there?
Good question. I'll give you an example of this exact thing happened to me last week, where I was actually speaking to an SDR manager. So they're not, I knew outright they're not the decision maker. They're highly likely not to have any authority to spend any money, but they are ultimately the person who would probably get most value out of our product and who would use it. I get hit with a no budget, we're actually cutting costs. So I kind of say, okay, just so I understand, is it the case that there is a spending freeze right now, or do you just need some help in, first of all, understanding the products that are going to bring you most value right now, the situation that you find yourself in right now, and then will you just need some help trying to put a case forward to whoever it is that decides on spending money that this is a worthwhile investment? And I got the latter answer of, well, yeah, if there's something there that can really help us right now, then we're all ears. I'll just need to build a case for my boss. In my opinion, building a business case and building helping your champion sell it in is just part of your job in any sales cycle. It's just, again, it's the objection from the off is just a guard that they've put out in front of them, and it's just
so how do you do it
like any other way.
I love this, and I'm going to keep drilling on this because I think it's a great topic. Certainly very poignant at the moment, as it's really May and we're in the middle of the COVID situation. But this objection has existed for a long time.
Right.
So you've clarified what no budget means. You've clarified that if you can position a use case or a case study to help this person become a champion, how do you then make sure that champion goes and delivers the message the right way, right? Obviously, I know you're going to say, great, let's see if we can get them on a call and, that kind of stuff. But let's say they like, no, I can't get them on a call. How do you then position that champion to go do it in the way that it needs to be done? So they don't just sort of go, hey, I saw this really cool tool called Refract. And their boss goes, how much is it? And they go, well, it's $10,000. I'm like, no, like we all know that's what happens. So how do you manage that part of the process when you're not there?
It's a really good question, Richard. I think one of the pitfalls that I see people making discovery calls is that they kind of, everyone sort of thinks that the people they sell to are dead used to buying stuff. And actually, a lot of the time, we're selling to people who are just really inexperienced buyers. This might be the first time that they've ever bought anything like what you sell before. It might be the first thing that they've ever the first time they've ever been involved in a buying cycle. And so we have to do a job of kind of taking that person by the hand. And I kind of think of it like walking through it's like the GPS map. And you've got to walk and take that person in the car with you to get to the end point. And so one of the things I do, and I know that we taught my team to do, is to build business cases with the champion. Say, listen, I'm gonna make this insanely easy for you, so that you've got something that you can just take to your boss. And I'll just once we've identified, first of all, that there's a genuine, compelling reason why they'd want to actually buy the product, which is the first step. There's no point building a business case until you've actually established that. Is I'll just get them on a call and I'll kind of share a Google Doc with them, and we'll just start kind of typing out. I'll start asking them questions and starting to put some of their own team's metrics into the business case. Okay, right. So you told me that right now you've only got one person hitting quota in your team. Right. What's that person? What's the number that they're doing? Okay. Tell me about the rest of the team. What would it mean if you could increase their performance by 20%? okay, your current ramp time of new hires is X. What are you paying generally in salary? What would it mean if that you could break down by month? I'm just asking the questions that they know the answers to, but I'm just kind of helping to build that Google Doc, but making it seem like it's a partnership, almost typing it out with them. And then at the end of it, I just give them a nice document to say, okay, take it to your boss. And this is what I want you to present it to, and we agree on what that conversation sounds like. And it's often a really effective method that they feel that they actually feel that it makes it feel like they've actually put that business case together. It makes them look more professional. It makes them look like they've done a lot more due diligence themselves, and prospects love it. They love that conversation of kind of building this business case they can take to their boss and
Yeah,
say, hey,
I also think though that that's what real rapport building is. Richard Smith has also left them with this. Hey, Richard's going to make sure I don't say anything stupid. He's going to make sure
right,
that even if I get a no, I'm going to go in intelligently, that I'm going to position myself well. So hopefully that's also coming through, which then means even if it's not now, later there's trust. Like that's how you build real trust, right? And it's interesting because Scott does a similar thing, but he likes to role play it out loud. And he's on mute at the moment because he's got noisy kids like I do. I just chained mine up for a few minutes. Um, but but you do it from a doc perspective. Scott does it in this verbal conversation thing. So I love that approach.
yeah.
Um, so
Another little tip there that one of my colleagues does is similar to kind of Scott's approach of role playing is I'd always ask if your champion has to go to their boss to get sign off, and you're never going to get a conversation with that person, is ask the question, okay, so does that person, your boss, do they if they say no, does this kill this deal? And they'll typically say, yeah. Say, okay, if they say yes, does that mean we're going forward? Yeah, okay. Okay, so what are the reasons you'd be going forward? When you ask that question to your prospect, what they will do is they will actually tell you the reasons why they're buying. And oftentimes you find out reasons that they're buying that you, in their own words, that you never even thought they were that important in the sales, in that entire process. And they just sit and tell you basically their sales pitch as to what and you can, the order that they give you those reasons is the order of importance that they put on them. And so you get an idea as to what is actually most important for them and what key value they've seen in your product. And
yeah, and then you focus that on that item the rest of the sales process, and it informs you as you move forward with other deals in your pipeline.
Right.
You might remember, oh, this particular thing that I wasn't expecting is actually more prominent. So now we can potentially change our playbook and our scripting and our points of emphasis and all this stuff. I always ask those kind of questions just like you do. So I love that you brought that up. I want to change the subject and ask you a little bit of what it's like being a tech entrepreneur in the UK and in Newcastle area. I mean, the traditional kind of way here is, get some venture capital money and grow a team and, do a raise and growth round and all that kind of stuff. There's plenty of people here who, bootstrap still and build companies, kind of the old fashioned way or whatnot, but I'm completely clueless about what the norm is in the UK. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that and what that journey has been like for you, going from, working for somebody else to, running your own technology company.
Yeah, I think as far as like raising money, and in the UK you've got kind of London and then you've got everything outside of London, and like, investment rounds in London are, relatively small fry versus anywhere in the US. So when you compare that, say if you got the northeast of England, Newcastle, the amounts of investment and funding and opportunities on that front available are largely very limited, and obviously very very small fry to what would be.
So does it even become part of the focus then, or when you decide to go do your own business, or are you just sort of operating under the understanding like I got to bootstrap this sucker? and we got to be very intentional about how we spend capital and, grow much slower and that type of thing?
No, I mean, I think, we've raised money as a business. We've gone on the VC route, but, the sums of money talking about are just significantly lower. So we have to, I think, get a bit smarter about how we grow. It's not all about, okay, right, we're going to go and hire 20 sales reps right now. It's just a lot more, you've got to be a bit more just organic in those respects, and the money that you raise can kind of help you, grow a little bit faster, but maybe not as fast as you want. I think being up in Newcastle as an example, Newcastle has always been renowned for having quite a, even as a relatively small city, it's been renowned for having quite a kind of buzzy tech startup kind of ecosystem.
I didn't know that. That's great. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, outside of London, definitely one of the regions that there's been a lot of like accelerators and things like that. And so I think as a result, like it's because it's not a big city and there's not huge amounts of investment. When you do raise money, you kind of become well known in that region.
Your profile gets elevated a little bit, right?
Exactly.
In that particular area. Yeah.
But then, I think, and we really like that, and we really like the fact that we're a local company and that we've, we're kind of outside of the London bubble, and it still makes me laugh. I think whenever we're selling to North American companies, we say we're selling to a company on the West Coast and Silicon Valley, I think they're always, a lot of the time, they actually don't realize that we're in the UK or in Newcastle. They think that it's just I'm just a British person who migrated over a few years ago, and
I think you're from Newcastle, California, which is just east of Sacramento on the way to Tahoe.
I didn't realize there was a Newcastle. I knew there was one in Australia, but not in North America. But yeah, it's fun, and I think it's fair to say that even though we have raised a very small amount of money, we feel like we punch above our weight in this category that we find ourselves in.
What are, I noticed, obviously you're a co-founder, right? So I'm going to shift again a little bit. Are you the business-minded co-founder, the tech-minded co-founder? And I'm wondering what that relationship is like early, and what advice you can give to people on having co-founders and trying to find the right one, right? It's like trying to like find a rock band, right?
Yeah, so we're a little bit different at Refract. I think most SaaS companies, when they're founded, nearly always have a tech founder on board. In fact, that's mainly the person who usually finds the business they've created the product. We were very different. So me and Kevin, my co-founder and CEO, we both worked with each other at a previous company, and we're both sales people by trade. That's what we've always done.
That's unique and different there in and of itself. Yeah,
absolutely. And so the first version of the product, we outsourced the development of that. And since then, Paul, who's it's kind of a three-way co-founder, we hired Paul like 2 years into the journey, but because he's just been so instrumental, really, to kind of where the product is today, we wanted to really make him a co-founder as well, make him feel part of that, because he, without him, the product would never be to where it is today. But I think that was massively beneficial to us. I think I've done some mentoring with some startups before, and they're largely like tech, they're technical founders, and I've done like sales kind of workshops with them. And the one thing that always kind of baffles me is that with technical co-founders, they just don't see themselves as salespeople, and they agonize for months and months about having the perfect, MVP. And I'm like, God, if you saw what Refract was MVP, it makes me kind of cringe when I think about it now. I'm amazed that anybody paid any money for it, but they did. And I think you just need to get out there and start selling. And collectively, me and Kevin in those early days were literally just selling Refract, taking literally whatever people were prepared to pay, but we take the money, and it helped us build that kind of foundation of customers, traction, proof of revenue, even if it was small fry to investors. And it kind of like the product does not need to be perfect, doesn't need to look polished, doesn't need to work the way you want it in those early stages.
It's a really, really good point. Because I work with a ton of early stage companies as well. And I'm always telling them, like, man, all of these features that you're thinking about, they might be irrelevant, right? To your earlier point, Smith, about like delivering a pitch and somebody telling you, actually, this is like the main pain point, the main reason that I like about this. And you're like, oh shit, I wasn't even thinking about that, right? So I always love trying to get out there early and test the messaging and test the product. And there's so much to be learned in doing that. So I'm always encouraging people to get out there sooner rather than later. So it's cool that you guys had that instinct from the start, because maybe you're the two main co-founders at the beginning were salespeople. That's different.
How did you go about finding that tech person, right? Granted, you also had a partner to sort of bounce the idea of like, hey, is this the right person or not, which is really, really nice. But I do think people, whether they're the tech mind looking for the business side or the business side looking for the tech side, you may or may not know what you're looking for, because that's just not your world, right?
Yeah.
What advice do you give people for that?
I mean, we were really lucky that Paul, our CTO, we'd worked with him at a previous company as well, so we kind of knew what we were getting. I think what was maybe a little bit of an unknown was when we'd worked with him, he was just a kind of a senior developer. Like, it was difficult to really. You've got to have such a chemistry as a co-founding team. You know, you kind of live and breathe and ride on the roller coaster, and have to be there to pick each other up, and you know, when everyone's down and all the rest of it. And maybe you've never had that kind of relationship. We hadn't had that relationship with Paul to that extent to that stage. So there's a lot of trust and a lot of like boundaries that you have to suddenly put around each other and say, welcome them in, and say the conversations that me and Kev have together behind closed doors, we got to have those conversations with you two now and be totally comfortable with it. So I think maybe it's to have that true trust and understanding of, do you work together? You know, do you, if one of you is having a bad day, can you pick each other up? And so that is some of the best, most important things you can have as a co-founding team. But it takes time to get to that level with somebody. So it's certainly not something that you would just take a punt on. I don't think. I think you have to be quite sure of yourself before you do it.
Makes sense. Richard's the one who's got tons of noise from children and everything else going on over there. Have you guys seen sales cycles adjust and things like that because of everything that's going on, or have you managed to just kind of play through that?
So what we've seen is that maybe a lot of prospects that were already in our pipeline 2 months ago, a lot of those have got stuck. Their situation's changed. What we've seen, though, is the new raft of people who have come out of the woodwork and suddenly want Refract more than ever, because their world has changed, and so they've got more of a demand for what we have. And with those guys, the sales cycles have been lower than ever. It just shows that that shift in market conditions, and when I say shift, in some respects, the world was turned upside down overnight, so it is a bit extreme. Has seen us, bring a whole raft of new customers into the pipeline and over the line really, really quickly. But it's also about changing your messaging as well. We've had to completely flip and really the value proposition of Refract. We've had to put a lot of thought into that. With a big focus right now on remote sales teams. Is really kind of the thing that we're leading with. It's everyone's sales teams now are kind of from home. Everyone's alone, isolated. There's a lack of visibility into, you're no longer sat on the other side of the desk to your salesperson. And so we've seen a new raft of prospects who've came to us. It's amazing. Like 80% of what we've done traditionally has been outbound, and we've seen a huge shift towards inbound in the past few weeks. And I think that's just shown by suddenly people have much more of a need for what you sell with these changing conditions.
Is you talked about earlier when we were just chatting, like you've been quite intentional of late in the last year and a half or so, I think you said, kind of putting more content out on LinkedIn and building your brand and whatnot. One of the things that doesn't get talked about that often is the ROI that comes from those efforts. I think people talk about social selling all the time, and they talked about, prospecting through LinkedIn and that kind of stuff. But Richard and I can both attest to this. I mean, our entire surf and sales business was built off the back of just our content and network that we have on LinkedIn, let alone arguably both of our consulting businesses. So I'm curious if you could talk to like the effect that effort in building your own brand, sharing your wisdom and stories with the global kind of sales community, what that has done in terms of bringing ROI to you and your business.
It's scary, really, when I think about it. Like, it blows.
Scary good, scary bad.
Scary good. I mean, it blows my mind that LinkedIn right now, in my opinion, I mean, I always think to myself, if LinkedIn 10x their prices overnight, they'd have so many people saying, yep, no problem.
Great. I can't believe you just put that out into the universe right now.
I mean, it pains me to say it because, the LinkedIn beast, but I think like there is.
Edit, but that might be the first thing we ever edit out of our podcast.
I know Scott's got his personal beefs with LinkedIn around.
Yeah, that's not one I've had to go to the table with yet, but I got a new one now.
But what I mean by that is like so many sales teams across the world rely on LinkedIn for their prospecting. So many people now rely on LinkedIn because of the reach that it's brought itself. It's funny, there's a guy called you would have spoke, like he's been on he was meant to be on the UK versus US throwdown we did. Benjamin Dennehy. He's very passionate about LinkedIn. He says it's not social selling, it's social marketing, and I totally believe him because he's saying I can put a post on LinkedIn, I don't have to do any work. And he says, I'm an order taker. People just come to me and say, I want to hire you. And he's like, I haven't had to do any selling to them. Why? It's not called, like, why is it called social selling? And I kind of see a similar sort of thing in my world where I can build conversations with doing very little by just sharing expertise and sharing experience. And by the way, the amount of kind of traction reach I get on my posts is relatively small compared to you guys. But one of my team said to me the other week, "Hey, Rich, where you have a lot of opportunities, and where do you get your opportunities from?" And I'm like, probably about 3/4 are from my LinkedIn network, with me having to do very little. I say very little. I mean, I have to post every day, but
I'm glad we're talking about that. So, I mean, I think it's really important. I think people don't believe that business comes from these kind of things. But it absolutely does. I mean, I can't even tell you how many people just reach out to me and say, hey, I've been following some of your stuff for the last couple of months or for years, what have you. And I'd love to talk to you because I think you might be able to help us. And then, boom, I've got a consulting gig, right? Or boom, we've got somebody who's going to go to surf and sales event or sponsor it. I mean, we're not talking about like a couple $100 here. We're talking about significant ROI and investment from, like you said, very little effort. I mean, it's time consuming, but, replying and interacting and engaging with people who are engaging with your posts is not that hard compared to making 200 cold calls, right? Or figuring out a cadence and email, copy to approach people out there in the marketplace.
Yeah.
But the difference too, though, Scott, is one, you can disagree with me. Our egos need to be stroked, once or twice a day by how many views we get.
Oh, you get obsessed by it. You get truly obsessed by it. So it's actually to the point of unhealthy. But
yeah, I agree. But the other part is that what you're doing is you're weeding through those 200 emails or phone calls that you made in a week to get to the handful of conversations. You're just doing it way faster and way more effective than any other thing. that I've seen, right? Like I'm now talking to people who are buyers, will be buyers, influence buyers' decisions because they're end users. I'm talking. It is my account-based marketing strategy, right? LinkedIn is the account-based marketing strategy, I think, for a lot of what we do. And there are ways you can actually nuance that even
it's
better.
almost the entirety of our demand gen funnel for our own businesses.
What I would say though, Scott, is I think you did kind of maybe play it down a little bit too much around, yeah, it's time consuming. Like it is time consuming.
Oh, it's super time consuming.
And it's like, you know, it's
the days that I post content, the interaction that I have to have around that content consumes the majority of my workday if I'm not careful. So I'm not one of these people who will post every single day. Number one, I don't think I have that much to say or that many original thoughts. And if the spirit doesn't compel me to write something, then I don't write something. But number two, I consciously don't write things for a few days at a time so I can catch up on other work because it is so time consuming.
Here's one question I've got. So sometimes I'll see like a post that you put out, Scott, for example, and it doesn't necessarily, you know, they talk about if you post content, post it to your buyer. And I just want to kind of challenge that because sometimes I see a post that you put out, and it's not posted to your buyer who's maybe like a CEO of a tech company, or it's just like you kind of sharing an opinion on something that just gets loads of traction and brings people to your profile, and which is where they maybe learn about you and what you do. And I think people think in their head, oh, the posts I have to put out have to sync my buyer. They don't. They just have to get traction and audience, and the more people that you get interacting, the more people are going to check you out.
I've actually had this exact conversation and borderline argument with some other people who've got big followings on LinkedIn and other places. And, you know, to me, it's about authenticity and being real and true to kind of who you are. Like, I don't write things scientifically to like target particular buyers or anything like that. Like I'm just sharing things that I've been through or stories, you know, or things that I'm doing right now that seem to be working or not working and what have you. And some of these thoughts like come into my head and 5 minutes later, boom, it's like a post and it'll do really well. And there's a difference between doing that and being like so scientific in your approach to what you're putting out there that I think it starts to get a little smelly, and I think people can see through it sometimes, right? And I don't want to be viewed as somebody who's just like calculated all the time, where everything that they are or everything that they write and talk about is like designed for the specific purpose to build my brand or designed to bring me business. Like, no, sometimes I'm just like shooting the shit, and sometimes I just have a funny story, and sometimes I'm frustrated and I want to share that. So it's interesting. I don't know. Richard has a boy grin on his face over there, like he doesn't believe me. But I'm nowhere near it.
Literally typing into the message because I private message Scott during these. I'm like, you're so full of shit.
That's not true. It's not true at all.
No, but I know you at an intimate level. I know that part of what you do too, though, is you wait to find something that you think will resonate with people, not from a scientific approach, but from an emotional approach.
Oh, for sure. That's one of the reasons why I don't post every single day. Like if something doesn't
right. Whereas I'm like, I post all the time, right? Like we're the opposite in that way. I post kind of all the time because I think it's interesting. And you post when you're like, oh, I think this is really interesting. Like there's a subtle difference between the two of us and how we do this. And you know, in all due fairness, you know, you get way more visibility than I do. So there's something to be said for it. But it's back to Scott's original point. It is not easy to figure out.
It is a full-time job, and the more you do it, and the bigger you kind of the bigger your network gets and everything, it gets harder. But it also gets a lot more rewarding, and that reward can be, you know, bigger ROI in terms of deal flow and revenue, or it can be ROI in terms of impact that you're having on others.
Well, here's the thing,
Yeah.
right? If I didn't post content on LinkedIn, I would never be speaking to you guys today.
That's 100% true.
So there's benefits here beyond just creating pipeline. Like I look at, it's helped me get on podcasts that, like, you know, little old Richard Smith, who's only been doing sales for 13 years, is on something, getting invited on, you know, some of the most well-known kind of tech sales podcasts out there. It's getting involved on webinars. I'm speaking on stages at events. Okay, maybe that's not for everybody, and I get that. But what I'm doing is I'm building awareness and brand for my company, so people become, oh, Refract, I've heard of you, I know Rich, and I've seen him on stage, and it's all of the kind of the other benefits to doing it. And I think a lot of people cringe about it because they're like, they don't want to be seen as this kind of LinkedIn celebrity. And I do understand that, but I think it's, at the same time, I feel like it's just a missed opportunity. Like the world of sales, in my opinion, has demanded that you're missing out on opportunities by not doing it. You just have to find your voice to get comfortable with it.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I wrote.
How do you differentiate? I have a question for you. Like, let's say I'm your sales rep, right? Not you, because how do you coach if they want to come to you and start doing more on LinkedIn? How will you coach them, or do you coach them on their own personal brand and building that versus the Refract brand? Like they may, Scott and I have our own language, we have our own business, we can sort of talk shit because we don't have a boss, right?
Yeah.
I assume if I had a boss, my boss might not like that attitude.
To be fair, I was talking like this even when I did have bosses. And it did get me in trouble sometimes.
I really kind of, it winds me up how like some companies are very like, they're very draconian about, unless you're posting about our company, then you're not allowed to post. And there are companies out there that are very strict and have rules around that. One of my bugbears in life is trying to get my salespeople to do more of it. Like, you've had a gal on your show very recently who's, she's from a competitor, and she's shown the way to do it. And it kind of like, it bugs me when I'm like saying, I'm like, a gal on my sales team say, hey, I'm not seeing that many females in sales building a great brand up for themselves on LinkedIn. You could be the UK version of this person.
Yes.
And it's like, here's some ideas and here's some inspiration. And hey, some of my best ideas just come from my calendar. The call I had last week, the demo that I sat through, the one-to-one I had, I said, you're having all these experiences too. Like, imagine if you just did this. And I think it's a desire factor. It's some people, they've either got the desire to every night think of a great post in their head that they want to put out in the morning and be just consistent with it day after day. It's hard.
But Richard, to your point, it is a pipeline. It is a demand gen, lead gen tool. That's their job. Why aren't you compensating them for it? You want them to do it? You can't. To your point, if they don't want to do it, that's fine. But maybe if they're and maybe this is the question you need to ask is, hey, do you not do this because you're afraid if you spend too much time on it, you're not going to be able to hit these other metrics? Like, I maybe that's a valid conversation because you're trying to understand.
They would be,
not that
they would be compensated on it. If they're using it to their effect to create qualified opportunities and booked appointments and everything else, then they're going to get compensated on it. This is just I'm just saying, like, this is actually an easier way of you maybe doing it than sitting there and making 30 calls a day.
You can compensate it, Richard Harris. When I was at Qualia, I made a big push to get all of my sales team and sales leaders and whatnot to start being active on LinkedIn and growing their network. And I had competitions, and I paid out, $500 here, $500 there for people who hit these particular benchmarks and milestones, because I knew it would come back to us in terms of pipeline and deal flow for the software that we were selling. So I think
that's what I wonder.
So you can do that kind of thing. You don't
so
have
Richard
it doesn't
Smith,
have to be part of the comp plan, though. If you have extra budget to create and gamify it and create a sales contest around it, that was something that worked for me that others might be able to try.
That's cool.
So And Richard may say, "Well, Rick Scott, there's no budget," which ties us all the way back to the beginning of our conversation today. So, but I do think that there's something to that, because I think what Scott's approach is that, and I think some reps might think this unintentionally, but they might think that, oh, Richard Smith's only asking me to do this because he wants me to grow the Refract brand, right? He wants me to go get business for them. And Scott's been able to teach both pieces that, hey, this is about, yes, it's about Refract, but it's also about your long-term career growth. I'm here to help you have a career. Look, if you want to stay here at Refract for 10 years, I'm not.
What I don't understand is why people think they're different. Like it's all tied together. Like if Smith grows his personal brand, by nature, Refract is going to get bigger and more well known. They don't have to be separated out. I don't understand that.
Here's the other message I put out there to salespeople listen to this, thinking of LinkedIn as purely just something that they, use to as a digital CV, as I call it, a resume, as you guys would say. If I'm hiring a salesperson, I get a CV, a resume, PDF. It's the first thing I do. I see the name. I don't look at anything else in the resume. I type that person's name into LinkedIn. I say, what's their profile look like? Are they actually actively using LinkedIn? And if I'm doing it, lots of other sales leaders are doing it. You put your heart and soul into creating a resume. I just don't even read it. Why do I care what university you went to?
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I've been doing the same thing, man. I go check somebody out. Are they active? And if they're not, I absolutely judge them. And they go straight to the bottom of the barrel these days. 100%.
There's a company I'm advising, and I gave that advice yesterday. I gave that advice.
Good.
Today, where I'm like, why are you looking at this person? They're 20 years in sales. Sure, everybody says they can do it, but she's got literally 378 connections on LinkedIn.
20 years in sales, and you've made 300 connections.
Right.
Yeah. So then I turn them on to, a company we all know and respect, unfortunately has had to lay off some people. And I'm like, go talk to those people. They actually are this tool that you're looking to do. Why wouldn't you hire them? Right? Like they know the process. So this has been a great conversation, Mr. Smith. We do appreciate it.
The question is, will Smith's episode be the most downloaded episode from all of our UK guests? Friends. Yeah, you got to beat Disney and Perkins.
I don't know if I can beat Disney's. Disney just needs to post once on his LinkedIn. He's got all these views. I've got.
I don't know. Maybe you beat him. Maybe you put in a little bit more effort.
I'll call it out and say that Daniel Disney's social selling of his own podcast episode is weak. Right?
You have it.
Smith. Like that.
You can go. Gauntlet's been thrown. Go get him. Hey, before we get out of here, what can we do for you? We always try to offer help to the folks that have come on the show. Just with your time. Is there anything that we can do for you to try to support you and what you're up to in your business?
I think the one thing it'd be great to get your advice on is I think we've always had some challenges being one, a UK company in the space that we operate in, and two, not necessarily being the most well known. It's like I heard Daryl Prale say, he gets asked, "Oh, so you're like a sales loft or outreach," and we get that same thing in our world, and it's like I think there's that. My CEO calls it SaaS racism, which exists, which I totally agree. Of you get judged about. Oh, so you're like one of them. And I think that's always been a kind of challenge for us, particularly in the US market, selling to the US, of how do you best get people to kind of see beyond that of just thinking, all right, you're not one of them, so we're not going to take you as seriously. And I think it's a lot of it is it's a brand thing, it's a perception thing, and it's if you're not one of those companies that's kind of upper right on G2 crowd, it's kind of like, what? Why should we be looking at you? And just curious to hear your thoughts and advice on that?
Well, I oddly feel compelled to embrace when somebody says, "Oh, you're like so and so and like such and such." So rather than fight it or get frustrated with it, I'd be like, "Yes, exactly." Except, and now I have the opportunity to differentiate myself, and that differentiation has nothing to do with geographic location of the company. It has to do with what we do that particular group hasn't put as much emphasis on or is lacking. So when I was building out this last company, Qualia, we would call up title insurance companies and they'd be like, "Oh, you're like SoftPro. Oh, you're like ResRed." Like, yes, except those were built in 1980 and are on-prem, and we're the first cloud-based settlement system that's out there. So I use it as a way to sort of legitimatize us, to be honest with you. Like, yes, we are just like them, right? And so, and I've said this to Daryl, I've been like, yeah, you should just be like, yeah, we're exactly like SalesLoft and Outreach in terms of like what we're trying to do, but here's how we're different. Mm-hmm. And so you might kind of take that tact and rather than being frustrated by it, maybe there's a way to just embrace it that legitimatizes you a little more. What do you think, Harris?
I mean, I agree with all of that. I think the other piece, and maybe you're doing it and I don't see it, is that it feels like some of the competitors in your space are doing their LinkedIn approach like you do, but they're doing it at a company level, right? They are, but they're also putting out a ton of research, right? They're putting out data, they're putting out the stuff that's the meat on the bone, right? And I think that, that social proof, that real proof is what really, really matters. And I don't know if they have if in marketing they have this person who just focuses on this it's clearly some form of content marketing,
right?
And then getting that out there. So I don't know if that's how you guys approach that, but I see that as the two
Smith
pieces.
said it. I mean, they maybe it has to do with brand. Yes, it has to do with brand. Like, you're losing on brand because some of these other people have an army of employees who are all being very active in terms of their own personal engagement and brand building the way you are. So you're going to lose 10 to 1, 50 to 1 if there's only one person in a particular organization. And, I don't know if you agree with this, but it certainly seems to me that there are many more than in the based on the quality of what they say or anything like that. Don't get me wrong, but just based on network size. And so that might be, an area of opportunity to try to grow, your guys' business and whatnot.
I think I also think it's becoming a job requirement. Like, I actually, for this
I do
company,
too. We've talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but not for the company I was referring to this morning. I said your job description needs to say that they have to be able to demonstrate sociability specifically on LinkedIn to their targeted market. They happen to be selling to heads of sales and heads of revenue. That's a job requirement. That to me is almost more important than the ability to make 200 dials a day.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, man. We really appreciate you spending some time with us this evening, and wish you all the best, man. It's been great kind of getting to know you over the last couple weeks and months. I will say, during our UK versus USA game, you, in my opinion, were the only one that really kind of understood what this particular game was all about. And what I mean by that is, like, you'd get in, you'd try to talk fast, you make your points, try to get out. And all the American guys on the side were like, man, Dunning and Costas, these guys are just taking way too long to speak. They don't understand what's going on here, and Disney's just asleep at the wheel somewhere. I give you credit. You held your own quite well in my estimation.
Yeah, here's another. I appreciate that. Although I'm probably now the most hated in my team. They probably resent me now. But here's the thing. 4 or 5 years ago, I tried a number of times to prospect Scott Leese as a salesperson.
No shit.
And failed miserably, obviously. But now, fast forward a few years later, I'm now speaking with him on his podcast. So that just goes to show salespeople out there that play the long game. I mean, I can't sell to him now. He's not a VP of sales anymore, but, never mind. We're friends.
That's great.
That's hilarious.
That's amazing. What a great story. All right, bud. We got to get out of here.
Thank you so much, man.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.